Like Girl Scouts. Snack night.
Okay, sorry, we're on. I'd like to call to order the first meeting of the SAU55 Withdrawal Planning Committee. Mrs. Belcher, would you mind taking the roll?
Sabrina Alberg.
Here.
Kim Farah.
Here.
John Hughes. Barbara Kiska.
Here.
Earl Metzler. Mark Sherwood.
Here.
Jennifer Silva.
Here.
Karen Steele.
Here.
Thank you. Since this is the first meeting and all members have not had a chance to introduce themselves, we're going to first go around and do that. You'll see there's an agenda that Mrs. Belcher put together. Thank you. We'll introduce, share the reason you're interested in serving on this committee, and then we'll move to the election of officers. So does anybody want to start?
Just go down the road.
Sure. Why don't you start, Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Kishka. I'm representing Plasto. I've been a resident for quite some number of years, and I'm mostly interested in making sure that we're spending our money wisely.
Thank you.
Jen Silva. I'm the Atkinson rep on the school board, and I was asked to serve on this committee to represent the school board.
I'm Kim Farah. I'm representing the school board. I'm a representative from Danville. Also, I am the current chair of SAU55.
Mark Sherwood Sandown. I wanted to get involved with this. Obviously, there has been some dynamism within the district recently, and I appreciate the confidence that has been placed in order to help oversee and make certain that things are running appropriately.
Sabrina Alberg, Danville. I first learned about this at the deliberated sessions, and I was intrigued to learn all the different aspects of, the benefits and the non-benefits and, what we're spending and when you look at some of the budgets and where we are. So I was very interested to get involved and see how it pans out and what the best interest of the district and the SAU are.
Karen Steele, Atkinson. Again, I learned about it at the deliberative session. Clearly, over 64% of the voters have had, there must be issues if that many people are voted to have this committee formed. So I wanted to better understand what the issues are, understand what the economies of scale are for the two districts being combined together in one SAU, and to make sure that we are doing the best for our students and for our taxpayers.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to the election of officers, RSA dictates that there will be a chair for this committee. I'm acting as the chair because I was the first board member named to the committee. So there's no requirement for a vice chair. I suppose once the chair is elected, he or she can make a decision as to whether or not we should move forward. The committee can discuss that. I think I would recommend it, especially since this is going to be occurring during the summer and people generally take vacations or may not be able to make it. So I'm going to open the floor to nominations for chair. Mrs. Silva?
I'm going to nominate you, Dr. Farah, for chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for chair? Rob?
Yes, John Hughes, though he is not here, I'll nominate him in absentia. One of the reasons is obviously in looking, in my opinion, in trying to do an analysis as to what makes the most sense both for our students and the taxpayers that we're representing, having the expertise of somebody that is on the budget committee that comes to the table with a somewhat neutral history, as far as I can tell, would be a phenomenal choice.
I second John.
Okay. Typically, and Mrs. Belcher, can you correct me? I typically don't allow nominations if the person is not here to either accept or decline the nomination.
I don't know the answer to that. As to whether or not he would accept the nomination, unless someone can find out.
Is this something we can delay to the next meeting?
I think Sean, you tried to get him now?
I texted him back. He said that he just got done, and he says
So he has no
he had
idea
a
what
long
he's
day.
walking
He
into.
says he's going to pass.
No.
I'm going to ask him if he wants to be chair.
Yeah, I could probably assume the answer from that one.
A 1 equals yes and 2 equals no.
So My viewpoint, and I think the viewpoint should be, is that the chair serves at the pleasure of the board. So if Dr. Farah does not meet the committee's standards per se, then she's just a motion, a second, and a ratification away from being no longer chair. So if that's the case, and you want to come here next time, and John's here, and he wants to take this all up, by all means, you can bring that to the table and vote on it accordingly.
I mean, I'm willing to let the nomination stand. We do have to elect a chair per RSA 94C2, 1B.
I'm not opposed to either person being chair. I'm a little reluctant to vote John as chair if I don't even know if he wants to be chair.
Yeah, nor do I. I've not had any conversations with him either. And my reason for nominating him is simply because of some of the past, histories and dynamics, thinking of somebody that truly does seem to be neutral, at least as far as I have heard, and, would be able to address some of the budgetary issues, which are certainly going to run into. That was my sole reason, so maybe I threw him into the pit without asking him. Kind of seems that way.
Well, it seems like we have to elect somebody tonight, and we should elect somebody who's here and able to accept, and then we can, as John mentioned, we can also
Revisit. Yeah.
revisit that and make it another decision.
Seems
later.
reasonable.
I agree with that.
And so I also support Dr. Farah being the chair, again, in his absence, because of your experience with the board as well as the SAU board. I think that you would be an ideal chair to lead this group.
So is the motion in the second for John still on the table? Yes?
I'd like to keep it on the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we currently have 2 nominations for chair, myself and John Hughes. Are there any other nominations for chair? This has to be called out 3 times. Are there any other nominations for chair? Any other nominations for chair? Okay. There being no other nominations for chair, I'm going to call the question. Since I was nominated first, I'll call my name first. All those in favor of Kim Farah as the chair, raise your hand. All opposed? It's 4-0.
I don't think we do oppose.
Yeah, it's just,
No, we don't do it. Sorry. I'm used to doing the,
just need you to, so I can just record who it was. Thank you. And Lisa, thank you.
all those in favor of John Hughes?
Thank you.
2 in favor?
Got it, thanks.
Okay, thank you. It seems that I am chair based on the vote. Thank you for your confidence. Moving on, as I said, I highly recommend that we have a vice chair. So I'm going to open the floor for nominations for vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I don't dare say anything.
I'd like to nominate Barbakishka.
Do that.
Do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Any other nominations for vice chair? Third time, any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, all in favor? 6-0.
Congratulations, ladies.
Congratulations. Okay. First, I would like to thank everybody for joining the committee. Mrs. Belcher was sending around a contact information sheet so that we could get emails and phone numbers sent out to the committee. The next item on the agenda is comments from the public. Moving forward, we will always put time for comments from the public. All the meetings per RSA will be public meetings, so they need to be noticed. That because of the RSA, they need to be noticed within our district and also with Hampstead, because Hampstead is part of the SAU, and all schools within the district, the SAU, have to be notified. There will be minutes taken, and we'll need to approve minutes, and those minutes will be publicly posted. Typically, these will be live streamed as the school board has already taken a vote on that, requesting that they be live streamed, unless there's some other event going on and we can't get those live streamed. In terms of, just for people that are not familiar, because this is a public body, it's a public meeting, it is subject to right to know requests under 91A. So if we are having communications outside of the meeting, and it comprises a board, that should not be a majority of the board, that should not be happening. So, while you're free to communicate amongst yourselves, you should reserve any communications to the entire board within the confines of the public meeting. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to let me know. And any requests also for information should come through the chair, and the chair, which is me, will have to either go through to the SAU or go through the Timberlane School Board, depending on what the request is, to make sure that that is entertained. The school board will be engaging counsel for this withdrawal. It will be separate from the SAU55 legal counsel. So if there are questions that I can't answer, that will be worked through the Timberlane Board's counsel. Are there any questions just on organization? Yep.
About the sharing of information, so the website that you set up, Mrs. Belcher, is that public? Does everybody have
public,
access
yes.
to that?
Yep.
So if there's documents that we want to share to the board, we put them there knowing that the public will have
That's
access
correct.
to them as well?
That's correct.
Okay,
The only thing
thank
that wouldn't go up on that website would be things that were confidential.
Okay. Thank you.
And so typically what you would want to do before you post, I would not post documents directly to that website. It's public. If it's something that we're going to be discussing, before it gets posted publicly, if you have a document that you want to share with the board, that should come to the chair so that will be copied for the board, and the board will discuss it, and then it will go into the public folder. Because what happens is if the public is moving into a public folder and this group hasn't discussed it, it can cause a lot of questions in the public's eyes sometime. So
Okay.
that's typically how we do it on the boards.
Okay, so the document would be posted after the meeting.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then if we wanted to share that information with the board members prior to the meeting, how do we do that?
That can be distributed from the board chair out to the board.
So I would send it to you.
Send it to me and I would distribute it. What we don't want to have is a series of emails among the board members that say you send a document out to the board, and then Jen starts asking questions and everybody else is copied on that. That becomes, in essence, a meeting of the board.
Okay. So
Typically what will happen is the documents will get sent out from the chair, and there won't be, if somebody has a question, if I say, do you mind if, are we using first names here?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I never know. So if Karen, you have a document that you want the board to have, that's fine. And if I'm gonna send it out and say, these are some documents that Karen prepared in advance of our meeting, please review them. That's what I would say. That way the board, if Jen has a question, she knows not to come to me, she can go to you. So, but that way we don't have email communications.
Perfect, I appreciate that clarification.
Because, and I would recommend that you have a separate email account from your personal email account regarding this committee, or if you're on, I have a school board account. That way you're not mixed, because your emails can be subject to right to know, especially if they comprise, say, a subcommittee of this committee.
Okay.
If you're just communicating amongst board members, that's not subject to right to know. But if we say there's a subcommittee here, that could be subject to a right to know. That's what my understanding from legal. So this way you don't get it mixed into your personal emails when somebody makes a right to know request and they ask for all your emails and you're searching through.
Thank you.
The comment about an attorney for the board, so the attorney is the attorney advising this committee, or is the attorney the school board attorney's attorney?
Well, the attorney will be engaged by the school board.
To represent this
To
committee?
Right,
Okay.
to entertain, but so this board has no authority to engage an attorney. So it's kind of an odd situation. So the Timberlane board will engage the attorney, and if we have questions, it will probably be up to, because we are board members, to question the attorney about procedural things.
Is this committee a subcommittee of the school board, or is it a standalone committee?
Actually, it is a standalone, I believe.
It's a standalone.
So why would we go through the school board?
Because you aren't authorized to touch any money, and if, in order to have in order to engage an attorney, it costs money. This
Okay.
committee has not been charged with any fines.
So once we have an attorney established, we don't, maybe I misunderstood.
It's the school board who's at their pleasure that they're going to
Supply an
engage an attorney for this board, for this
You
meeting.
won't have to go through the school board every time you have a question for an attorney, for the attorney, will you?
No, I think the school board is going to give me as the chair the authority to use the attorney that they have employed.
Okay, I'll make note of that.
Why don't you understand this?
So I should make that motion tomorrow night.
You should make that motion tomorrow night if we engage an attorney tomorrow night.
And
Yeah,
can we
Barbara.
make a motion here that we would not engage an attorney for this board unless we have a majority vote from this board?
No, we have no funds to engage.
Well, I mean, okay, all right.
Yeah, we can't engage an attorney because we don't have
But
the
I thought I
funds.
just heard you said you could say that we could engage an attorney through the school board. But I just want to make sure it's a joint decision.
Well, the school board will and really has to engage an attorney at some point here
Right.
for this committee. Because this, in order, as we send this plan and develop it, we need to make sure that we've done everything in accordance with the RSA before it goes up to the State Board of Education. So we'll be, the school board will ultimately, because this will ultimately need to be voted on by the school board, the withdrawal plan. So I guess I went on a tangent, they'll be engaging the attorney, but because I'm on the school board, or the school board can always authorize the attorney to speak to whoever they want
Okay.
in terms of that. So I'm sure the attorney will, I would hope that the board is going to give me the license to speak to the attorney they've engaged.
I just want to keep the costs.
Oh, yeah, there won't be, yes, I understand what you mean. Believe me, I'm very cognizant of the costs.
Circling back, and forgive me, it's perhaps due to my lack of experience, if a request for documentation is made, it should come through you, the chair.
Yes.
And then, did you say that then it would be distributed to all of us? And then after discussion, dissemination of it at the meeting, then it would be posted onto the site for the public to see? Did I hear that correctly? So it would not be posted in advance to the website until after it was discussed. Does that raise the potential of not giving the public time, if this is a public document that we've requested, say, from the SAU? Would this have the potential of not having it out there for the public in a timely enough manner to digest it and make public comments prior to the meeting?
Well,
And again,
if it's a public document, then we would, the public should already have access to it. I'm trying to think of a document
yeah, so
here.
I guess I'm saying
So-
if I want to know if there, the potential cost ramifications of not having pizza delivered to all 5 towns but only 4 towns. And so I wanted that poll, I requested it from the SAU, and that was going to be a point of discussion at the next meeting. Wouldn't the public benefit from having access to that documentation that would be discussed? And again, I'm not trying to muddy the water.
No, I get it. They would certainly benefit from that, but it is the charge of this committee to be looking at that document, and the public will have time to weigh in two different times. They are allowed to weigh in comments from the public, so maybe they don't get it until after our meeting, and then the next meeting they come and say, hey, I wanted to weigh in on this now that you have discussed it, and now that I've looked at it. And the other place that they're going to get to have a say is the public hearing. There's a requirement for a public
Right,
hearing
no,
prior to going up. to
Is there a
the DOA.
disadvantage to putting whatever request we make through you, the chair, putting it onto the site so the public in general has an ability to kind of see what we are seeing as their representatives? Is there a disadvantage? There very well may be.
I think so, just from my prior board experiences. If you put up a document and it hasn't been discussed, well, here's a perfect example. We got the pro forma SAU budget, and it is now a public document. So there have been questions raised about that, and this board has not even had a chance to discuss it. So I think it opens up it can lead to more questions than you may want if you're starting to post documents. The school board, just to give you our perspective, Mrs. Belcher puts together the agenda packet before the meeting, and we have access to that as school board members. But the general public doesn't have access to it until after.
Usually the next day. In
Until
most
after
cases,
we've
they get
had
it
that
the next day.
discussion. Because if it's just given to the public in advance, it can open up a lot of questions that are probably easier answered once the board has had a chance to meet on it.
More efficient.
That was a good example, thank you.
I think, just a couple of comments on that. I think holding back the documents until after the board has discussed it might lessen a lot of the questions that the public, like, we might already answer the questions. So they won't have as many questions.
I'm not suggesting that we proactively try to answer these questions and these queries that came from the public. In
No,
the
I know.
past, there's been some concern that not enough information was shared, and I'm sure, everybody can appreciate that. So putting it out there in advance, this is a topic we will be discussing. Board member XYZ requested this for, dissemination amongst the board. That's it. We obviously wouldn't comment until after we had discussed it at the following meeting. I'm just trying to put as much out there as possible and make it as visible to anybody that's interested as possible. But if the collective wisdom is we're hitting a beehive, then I will respect
we're
your
hitting a
collective
beehive.
wisdom.
Yes.
But the topic will be on the agenda so that people will see what it is
Okay.
we're going to be talking about. But the other comment I wanted to make was as far as requesting information, this committee as a whole, when we convene, can request information as well, not, right?
Correct,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, and I would expect most of the requests will happen as a result of this
I just
meeting.
want to clarify that. Thank you.
Barbara?
Speaking of document sharing, is it possible that when we are discussing a document here, that we have it up on the screen and the live stream? Do we have that technology?
How do people, I guess what normally happens here, when your staff puts up a PowerPoint, for instance, they bring a flash
Well, it
drive and then
depends on
it's
what your
projected?
presentation is. I would say that it would be, I'm not sure that that's a possibility for every document that comes up. If you were asking for something in a presentation format, then that
No,
would be
I'm-
something
I'm-
that they could do, but if it's just a basic document.
It's whatever documents we're looking at.
So the two components to that, it depends on who is available to run the technology that day. For example, if it were just me and I'm the only one here, the answer would be, I'm sorry, I cannot help you
You
because
can't do two things at once.
Right, right. So if it's the pleasure of the committee, we can certainly try to make an effort to do that, depending on what that document is. And it sounds like you may be requesting a lot of documents, so maybe you'll start to feel what's a comfortable amount to be sharing on screen versus making it available online and having that conversation. One more point I just want to make, if you don't mind, Dr. Farah, is that as it relates to the posting of information that goes on the committee's website, is that it would be information that has been verified and validated by the school district. It wouldn't necessarily be information that say, a committee member put some information together and put it in. Those numbers would have to be validated, because what we want to do, and it certainly isn't any count against any board member, but we want to just make sure that the numbers and the data that we're using is an agreed number that comes from the business office, because that's really where we're going to get the majority of the information.
Any other questions on that? So just to, are there any comments from the public? Well, I'm moving on to that part of the agenda. So I just want to talk a little bit about the overview of the process. I have gone through the RSA quite a bit, and I'm a firm believer in backwards planning. So if you've had a chance to look at the RSA, basically there are a couple things that are going to happen. I'll give you the overview and then try to explain what the timeline's going to have to be. The first thing we have to do is decide whether or not it's going to be making sense for us to withdraw. That even comes before the withdrawal plan. If we decide that it doesn't make any sense to withdraw, then we take a vote to that effect. If we do decide that we're moving forward with the withdrawal, then we have to come up with a withdrawal plan. That withdrawal plan will ultimately go to us, and I'm I may miss a few steps here. I didn't write this all out because I wasn't expecting here that I would be chairing, but basically, the withdrawal plan will ultimately go to a public hearing, and from there, it needs to be sent to the State Department of Education's Board of Education, which meets on a monthly basis. They review the withdrawal plan and give it a yes or no. They can also send it back and say, you didn't address this part of the RSA, or we'd like to see this added, or we suggest this change. Then it may have to be sent back to the Board of Education for final approval. They can't, and I'm sorry, I might be wrong on that, but they can't absolutely veto the plan. Once the plan is approved by the Board of Education, then it will have to go onto the warrant for our voters, and then it will have to pass by a 2/3 majority. So what we have to look at here timeline-wise, and I only have a rough idea because I haven't set all this down, is we have to look at the date that the warrant has to be posted, and then we have to look at the date that the State Board of Education meets, and we have to go back from there. So just so you have an idea here, to make this happen, the State Board of Education meets once a month, and in the fall, it meets on the second Thursday of the month. We should be aiming to get this plan to the Board of Education for their October 10th meeting at the latest, because they're going to need to have time, they're going to need to look at it, and if there are changes that need to be made, we're going to have to make the changes and then send it back. So in order to do that, then, they need it, I think it's at least 30 days prior to that, or at least, or how many
The
days
State Board
was
of
it?
Education shall review the proposed plan within 60 days of receipt. So
A
once we get
receipt.
it to them, they have 60 days to review it.
So they have 60 days to review it, which is why we'd have to get it in by October, because our warrant is going to have to be posted.
Yeah.
In
Usually it's
January.
the end of January.
So-
Finalized.
So they have 60 days to review the plan. What also has to happen is we have to have a public hearing at least 14 days before the submission of the plan to the State Board of Education. And then we have to notice our public hearing 10 days in advance. So just roughly, and I don't know, if somebody wants to take charge of this for the next meeting, feel free. If you want to timeline this all the way back and find when our deliverable dates are, somebody can certainly take that, or I can take that as an action.
We've got 17 and a half weeks.
I nominate Karen.
Second.
I'm not seeing the part in here about the public hearing, but I know it's in there. I'm just not finding it
No, it's not in
quickly.
here. It's not, there has to
Oh.
be a public hearing, but I know you've got to notice the public hearing at least 10 days in advance, right?
That gives
Depends
us
on what
14 weeks.
Yeah, it all depends.
So,
But we have
Could
time
be
for the
seven or,
extra
yeah,
cycle?
it's usually 7 or, yeah, 7. I think it's 7 now. I think I
okay,
took the count
so
out. Mhm.
essentially, we are looking at trying to have this thing wrapped up probably by the middle of August. So,
middle of September, but okay.
I was going for a September 1 date, and that's
well,
what I went
I always
back
like to
to.
give myself a few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so September 1,
Yeah,
September 1.
so, yeah, it's 17 and a half weeks till September 1
Okay,
from today.
so there you go.
Do you have a calendar over there?
Did, I just did
I
the-
was like-
No, I am not that good.
Does Chisholm Bop and everything.
I know she's amazing, but
Okay. So that's a rough overview, and so Karen, are you gonna timeline this back based
Sure.
on meetings and things like that?
Absolutely.
So that for the next meeting, we'll know, what we're looking at in terms of timelines. So the next thing on the agenda, because this is just really an organizational meeting, is to talk about developing a meeting schedule. Another thing that we also want to talk about is, what days of the meeting and things like that, and what we want to do for our next meeting. So in terms of a meeting schedule, given the fact that we only have, what was it, 14 and a half weeks?
14 weeks, yeah.
14
Let's go with
weeks.
14.
14 weeks.
let me go from 17 to 14.
I know.
Because
it
of
keeps
the
getting
public
shorter.
hearing and the notice of the public hearing.
Oh, she backed them out.
Sorry about that.
And from what I've read, because there are other withdrawal studies out there, I actually have one with me today that I was looking at earlier. I'm suggesting that we meet on an every other week basis here through the summer, so that we can get this
One
this
public
going.
hearing no less than 14 days prior to the submission of the state board.
Right.
So it's basically 7 meetings.
7 meetings, yeah. Which is, if we need more meetings, we can add them in. We may not, depending on how fast things move along. So are there, I know we can send out a poll, but does, what is today, Wednesday? In general, what days? I think we need to stay away, obviously, from Fridays and also from Thursdays, because our school board meets.
And
on the-
BudCom.
And BudCom, yeah, but BudCom won't really be meeting
Oh, right,
until
right, right, no, they
August.
won't, I keep forgetting that,
We could
sorry.
does anybody have any day of the week that doesn't work for them? I'm just trying to narrow this down before we send out a big
Or
poll.
not Wednesday.
Not Wednesday? Prefer not Wednesday. Okay.
Tuesdays actually work good for me.
I like
Okay.
Tuesdays.
I like Tuesdays.
You guys like
Everybody
Tuesdays?
okay with Tuesdays? Okay.
Madam Chair, the only issue with that is that the superintendent does meet with the Hampstead Board on those biweekly Tuesdays as well. So if you plan it, if it happens to be the opposite Tuesdays, you could also, it would also welcome the superintendent to participate. Otherwise, he may not be able to participate.
Okay, is Hampstead the first and third
The
Tuesday?
second and fourth.
So we should plan on the
First
first
and
and third Tuesdays. But I don't wanna have the next meeting 3 weeks out, though.
I wouldn't mind meeting next week, because the following week I'm gonna be traveling for work.
I wouldn't mind either. I'm just looking at my phone to try to get, we're May 1st.
Seventh.
On the 7th. That would be, that would
Is-
line up with the first and third Tuesday.
Oh, so we can meet May 7th.
Yep.
Sure.
Perfect.
The problem is we can't meet May 21st because there's an SAU meeting on the 21st. So we can plan May 7th. We should be planning to meet on the following week, though,
The 14th.
but that only gives us 1 week.
And we won't have the superintendent. What about May 15th? Wednesday.
May
Works.
15th.
That works for me.
Should we go with May 15th? I'd just like to plan, and then May 28th?
I won't be here that whole week of May 13th, just as a heads up. I'll be in Portugal.
Okay.
What was the next day you said after?
The 28th?
It's right after Memorial Day?
Yeah.
Should be okay.
And then we'll plan the first and third Tuesdays from then on. So that'll be June 4th, 18th.
And then if we need to add in between.
If we
can
need
just
to
in
add.
between. Yeah.
July 2nd, 16.
Wait, whoa.
No?
Whoa. July.
Well, we don't have to plan that far in advance,
Yeah.
but just try to keep Tuesday.
July
first and
2nd,
third.
I would anticipate might be rough for a lot of folks. I'll be here because.
I'll be around. Well, we can worry about it. We have
And you
plenty
can
of
move
time.
those Tuesdays at that point because school will be out of session and the Hampstead Board will not be meeting.
Oh, okay. Slide
Yeah,
those around.
so we could go. But that at least gives us some idea.
So we're gonna put on the docket up to the June 18th date, is that correct? And
Yes,
then you'll
please.
decide what to do for the summer?
Yeah, then we'll decide what to do.
Okay.
When we get into the meetings in May,
So I will post these dates.
yes,
Okay.
please.
The 7th, 15th, 28th, 4th, and 18th.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? All right. You ready for some brainstorming? So, I'm guessing that people have probably looked at other withdrawals, and don't feel bad if you haven't looked at any other withdrawal studies. Some people are. There are different ways to approach this. Some districts have done broken in subcommittees and done various aspects. The things that we have to look at are pretty much dictated by the RSA, because we're going to have to address these in the withdrawal study. And some groups that have done this have actually gone bing, bing, bing as they wrote up their withdrawal study to make it easy for the DOE when they read, oh, okay, now this section is addressing this, this, and this. So that could be one approach, is that we do subcommittees or subsections and everybody does it this way. Or we could talk as a group initially and look at pros and cons before we even decide if we're going to move forward with withdrawal. So I just like to hear the committee's ideas as to how you want to move forward from here.
I think there seems to be a little bit of an overlap, and I don't want to give the appearance of putting the cart before the horse, because the first thing we need to do as a group is to look at whether or not we think this makes sense to move forward with developing a plan. So I would be cautious about putting too much energy into things that might be actionable plan items, although
That's how you
some of that
decide, yeah.
information
Right.
is going to be valuable in trying to make that decision if we think it's, so I guess maybe a question I would have is, what factors would we be looking at to decide if we think it is worthwhile pursuing a plan? What would be the considerations?
So my thought on that is that we are looking at this from the Timberlane Regional School District. We are representing them. So for me, I would like to be able to see, again, the economies of scale. How is Timberlane benefiting financially, so quantitatively and qualitatively, from being a part of this SAU? And then I'd also like to understand what would the negatives be of withdrawing from the SAU. So I kind of envision a box, right? The pros and cons of staying, pros and cons of leaving. I need to understand what the economies of scale. I've heard a lot of stuff in Facebook and people talking in different meetings. Like I've heard that the contracts are part of the reason we have an SAU, yet I've heard that Hampstead didn't go in with Timberlane for the transportation contract and something about the food. So I'd like to be able to get the facts, understand where we really are we benefiting, and, you know, get the financial, qualitative and quantitative pros and cons.
Agree.
So maybe a pros and cons list is a good way to approach it?
And I think we really need the qualitative because, again, there's a lot of energy in the district, and I think we need to have a bunch of interviews or focus groups to be able to get the feedback from the communities, because there's a lot of energy and we need to at least hear all of that. I don't know if this is the place to do it or if we do it as a separate subcommittee.
We do a public hearing, so I think the public is more than welcome to come before every meeting and speak. So I don't know that we would need a meeting on top of the meetings that because we're having a lot, meeting pretty often.
Well, some SAUs or some committees have gone out and interviewed, say, SAU employees or members of the public. So that's something that somebody could take on, and then. But if we're going to be interviewing employees of the district, that obviously would need to go through the superintendent's office. So I'm not opposed to that. So, and Barbara, I'll get to you. I just want to pose a question to Karen. So you'd like to see a list of pros and cons. So how would you like to see this committee approach it? Do you want everybody to just go out and come think about this and come back next time with what we consider pros and cons of withdrawal?
Well, see, that's where I've been struggling, because I've been doing a lot of research over the last couple of weeks, pulling data. Mrs. Belcher's been very helpful to provide me some of the links for the SAU data. I found a lot of gaps in there, so that I can't get a full, complete picture of what our school district and our SAU budget is to be able to compare it. So that's one of the problems I have. I don't know the best way to get a complete set of data. I've spent hours on the NHDOE website. That has been able to fill in some of the gaps, but there's still a lot of gaps. So I don't know the best approach to get the data that would make me feel comfortable, so that I can say, these are the economies of scale, these are the benefits that we have by being a part of this SAU.
Okay. So you're going to need more data, and you've already gathered some data. So I would think at the next meeting that we'd want to see, if you're willing to share, what you have and what you think you need from a quantitative aspect for data to move this forward. So that would be one thing that we can put in our list of pros and cons from the quantitative. I can tell you, just reading other reports as I read through them, there is certainly information in these as to what are the advantages of a single district SAU versus a multi-district SAU, which can be quantitative or qualitative. And then there's the issues, and I know Jen and I have spoken about this, is the, fractionation is probably not the right word, of the staff when you have a 77-23 split. Is it really, is that how the staff is really working, or are they using, is it more 50-50? So are we essentially supplementing Hampstead? I mean, part of the issue arises is that their high school students go to Pinkerton, so they don't, anyway, so
It's a
that's
matter
sort of.
fairness.
So it's a matter of fairness, so, I mean, we do have time here, so it might just be beneficial to have, people submit pros and cons. I'd be happy to go through and, because I'm a researcher, Monadnock did an excellent job of looking at historical, or referencing articles that had been published in research studies on benefits, pros and cons of SAUs, multi-district SAUs, which doesn't appear to be any outstanding pros, but I can share that with everybody. Barbara?
So one of the things I want to see is the original plan that formed the SAU. Somebody thought this was a good idea at one point. What was the promise, and where are we now compared to that promise?
Just looking at what the original agreement was.
Yeah.
Back in
Why did they think it was a good
1964,
idea?
That is gonna be hard to find some,
I'm already checking with the reference librarians.
yeah.
I think, I know
Did
at
that
some
happen
point,
before TRSD came together?
Oh, wow.
well,
If
I
you
know
know-
at one point there was a fire at DOE and there was a lot of documents that were lost. There is a document that dates back to 1919 that I'm happy to share with all of you from the original formation of the SAUs, and they look nothing like they are now. But I was wondering if it might be helpful for this board for the next meeting, so that everybody understands, maybe one of the items that we look for the next meeting is a list of what services do we share with Hampstead.
Yes.
That may be a good starting point.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
I've been compiling budgets and everything, and again, there's a lot of gaps.
So I think starting
in
with
the budget.
knowing what the shared resources are.
Right.
You mean,
And
for
then
instance,
going from there.
give me an example of
For
services shared.
instance,
Because I will request this from the SAU.
we share a business administrator.
Legal counsel?
I don't
Well-
think we share legal counsel.
No, we don't share legal counsel. So, services that we share with Hampstead, well, that would,
Do we share food services? No, I don't believe that we do.
no, we
Do
don't.
we share bus services? I know that was back and forth. I don't
What
think.
other contracted services? I mean, looking at this, I have some of the exact same questions and concerns. You know, where does the rubber hit the road as far as our tax dollars go, and what is the benefit of being with Hampstead as well? To me, perhaps because this is not my forte, the budget that was given to all of us does not make a heck of a lot of sense, and there are more blank spaces that I need some clarification. Perhaps it's because it's not my bailiwick. That is something that personally I think should be the sole charge of all of us initially, because if it does not make sense financially from my perspective, for us to separate or be with, that is almost not a red light, green light, but certainly an orange light as to which direction, I think we should pursue.
Well,
Does everybody
Orange light.
have the SAU budget for this year?
The one that
current-
got sent out?
that is, let me give you a little
posted
explanation here on the budget. The budget that was sent out to the committee was not a budget that I requested be sent out to the committee. I was unaware that this budget was going out to the committee, and for that I apologize. I typically don't like things going out that I'm unaware of if I'm the acting chair of a committee. So this is a budget that was put together by SAU55 that is a kind of an estimation of what they think it would cost should we withdraw from the district. It's, in my mind, an eye-popping number that there would be an additional cost should we withdraw of $1.3 million, especially given that we are paying 77% of the current $2 million budget. That aside, there are assumptions made in this that I have to do. A lot of the extra cost in here, Mark, just if you're unaware of this, it appears, and we will definitely be asking the business administrator to join us at our next meeting, is that there are contractual obligations within the SAU that extend beyond the year 1920.
Right.
So this is making an assumption.
2020, hopefully.
Well, beyond 2020. 2020. I was thinking 2020.
Tickle with numbers over here. Jeez.
So this is making the assumption that should we leave in 2020, we're gonna have to pay out contractual obligations for employees that we will not be taking with us. And most of them are very
Yeah.
highly paid, compensated employees with the SAU. So that's a tremendous amount of this cost right here.
Understood, and so that's one of the questions, I think, that's where the rubber actually does meet the road. What would our contractual obligations be? And for that, I think we probably need legal to weigh in, because if we're still contractually obligated, as I will just say Timberlane, for some of these contractual salaries, even if for whatever reason these people are no longer working for Timberlane, that's something that we do need to consider as well.
Well, I do have the contractual obligations. At the next SAU meeting on May 9th, there will be a discussion on what are the existing contractual obligations within the SAU. I do know we have contractual obligations out through 2022. That does not negate the fact that we may still want to withdraw. We don't have to withdraw in 2020. We can make a plan and say, we are not going to withdraw till 2022, or we're not going to withdraw till 2021. There's also
Right.
the opportunity to negotiate. We could say, we'd like to withdraw, but we want to take those contractual obligations with us. So
Right.
this is where legal is going to come into play. So I don't think you also have to look at, when you look at reestablishing your own SAU, this is making the assumption that the staffing of the new SAU would be the same, say, as the staffing of the current SAU, and that wouldn't necessarily be the case, because now you've reduced by at least 23%, and possibly more, the number of, so there are things within this that I would not, I would take this lightly, because there are assumptions here that I don't think should be made at this point, because we're not at this point at looking at what would we look like if we would form our own SAU. Because in some sense, there should be some savings, because if you'll read other reports, that some of these SAUs have, as the SAU withdraws and becomes its own, they've downsized and had cost savings, but there's no reflection of that in this budget.
Yeah, and looking at some of the, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
that's
overstep.
okay.
In looking at some of the other SAUs around that are of similar size, and I'm not, again, we can get into this later as to exactly what positions you're referring to. You're saying more highly paid, so I'm assuming you're referring to superintendent, assistant superintendent. I don't know, and that's something that we certainly need to discuss. What would be appropriate for us as Timberlane? Could we downsize? Should we downsize from those administrators? I'm guessing that's what you're referring to.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Administrators, staff, because you would not be looking at the same number of.
Yeah, so could I request that we pull that information as to what similar school systems around us are having for their ancillary staff, be it, superintendent,
Would you like to
assistant
take that on?
superintendent?
Son of a. There you go. I have it right here for you. Well,
Yes, I would.
the part about the budget that I want to just make a quick comment on is that I feel like that is really putting the cart before the horse a lot.
Okay.
Because if we get to that point of saying, yes, we think it is worthwhile exploring a plan, the plan needs to address all of the financial implications. So, and then it will have to go to the voters, and and we will have to have a public hearing, and all those costs will be laid out to the public, but I am a little hesitant to look at short-term financial numbers in making that decision, because I think that is something that should go to the public as a whole if we move forward with a plan through a hearing and through a vote of the public. I think the initial question for me is more about the feasibility of, can we be our own SAU? And does it make sense to be our own SAU? And if we move forward in that direction, I think all of those other details are part of the plan, but that's why I was talking
See,
about at the beginning,
I
there's a
look
little
at
bit of
the
an
horse and the
overlap.
cart a little bit different, in that if it does not make financial sense, then why would we do it? So I think looking at the financials,
Because there could be local control. There have been SAUs that have withdrawn, or new districts that have withdrawn from an
Right.
SAU because they wanted control over their own district, because they felt it would educationally benefit their students. So I don't want to look at it strictly as a monetary sort of issue. And when you're looking at, maybe it costs an extra $100,000 a year out of a $70 million budget, I don't think that's the driver of the decision. I think the other aspects.
for a lot of people, it is the driver, it is the tax burden. So, I mean, that goes kind of into the pro and con aspect. It's a pro that we could potentially save, or a con because it would cost us that much more, but offsetting that con would have more local control. But there's a difference between a con of $100,000 between the towns and, $2 million, or whatever that number is, and we don't know what that number is.
Well, that's why I asked if everybody has seen, and maybe that's another good document to bring for next time for everybody, the current SAU budget and what that looks like, and then understanding what services we share.
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely.
Like not.
Yeah, so
not
that fills in one of the pieces of the puzzle that
Yeah,
yeah.
without getting into the,
Because when
Right,
you look at this
right.
number, you're automatically turned off.
Yeah, no,
that's a
absolutely.
big-
Well,
And we need some clarification as to where this
Yeah.
came from.
the current SAU budget is in this pro forma document.
oh, it is.
Is that the
budgeted
correct
amount
on the
is
first page?
1 point.
But is it the
No, no,
line
no.
by
The-
line SAU
no,
budget?
It is, but Barbara, it's on the second page. The total budget amount is 1.886221 million.
But the other thing is that in going back through all the budgets, the last time we actually had the individual salaries of the SAU employees was for 2013, 2014. Ever since then, all they do in the SAU budget is give us a one line, just like on this pro forma, it just says salaries, and that's
Okay.
not
So
helpful.
you'd like a breakdown for the next meeting?
Absolutely.
You want
Absolutely.
salaries,
Pardon?
How many employees there are? I don't know.
14.
Yeah, and I'd like to see it over the last 10 years. I want to be able to see trends and be able to make projections. It's all available. I've already pulled most of it in.
So what years do you need?
2009 through 2009?
2009 forward?
Yes, please.
Of all the salaries of SAU employees?
Yes, please.
Okay. We also want to look at, and I think these are posted because they were requested at the SAU. Mrs. Belcher, do we have the job descriptions for all the SAU employees, right? That's on the SAU website? Remember?
Most of them.
They're not all,
14?
it's
Not all
more
14.
so about like, if you wanted to open positions is basically what a lot of them, what we
The
found.
SAU board had asked for them.
Right.
I don't know. If it was part of the board packet, then it's likely that they are posted. But I would have to look. I was not prepared for the question.
Okay, well, I wasn't.
And I'm not sure who raised it too, but that was a really good point. Of all of our SAU employees, I would like to have them estimate for us how much time they spend on Timberlane and how much they spend on Hampstead.
Yep.
So I think these are great questions. Is this all information we want for the next meeting, or can we sparse it over the next 2 meetings?
Well, right now, well, no, listen, but there's not that, I don't think this is. Well, right now I have that we would like to see the services that we share with Hampstead, which, somebody mentioned, say, business administrator. I think that goes under the whole estimated time for each of the SAU staff, what they're spending their time on.
And then I think the
And then
current SAU budget,
Well, this is the
but is
current,
that line by line the way that we did it?
yeah, yeah, except it doesn't have the salaries broken out, yeah, that's
Okay,
pretty
so we
much,
just
this
need-
is pretty much what we see when we get the SAU budget.
It looks shorter. It looks a little shorter to me, but.
That's because we usually have more on the salary lines, but I can see if there's a more detailed,
So
a
add
more,
the salary lines to that? I don't think I have that.
I didn't bring it either, it's in my other,
But I was able to get the salaries for the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the business administrator from the Department of Education website. And then you can also compare that against all the other SAUs in the state. So we do have the highest paid superintendent. We have the third highest paid assistant superintendent. No, the fourth highest paid assistant superintendent and the third highest business administrator. So when you add that all together, we are significantly higher than every other SAU in the state for those three top positions.
Did you do a comparison out of curiosity for districts of similar size with those same positions and what the cost differential is if you add those three up per year?
And by student and by number of districts per SAU. There's 100 SAUs, 73 only have one school district. So then I'm looking at the 27 that have more than one district, and then within a district who has more than one town. Yep, done all that.
Yeah, because they break up into different, for instance, like Salem, they have like 100 more students than we do, but then they have 2 assistant superintendents and 1 superintendent, so they're all broken up a little bit.
But it does get tricky when you start to look at that because, and Mark, to your point about trying to take a look at other districts, you've got to be careful when you're looking because some of them are multi-district SAU versus a single district SAU. And what happens in a single district SAU is you may see they have 2 assistant superintendents, but they may not have, say, curriculum coordinators at each school. So I think when you start to look at a single district SAU, you've got to look not only at the SAU, but you've got to look at the top level of their other administrative positions
that's what
to kind of make the whole thing so it.
Need the
you can
full
see.
picture as to
Yeah,
how
and
much,
that's kind of
how
what
many
it is.
staff
Look
per
at the
student
SAU.
and what the cost is per.
Good luck with that, Mark.
Here's your starting point right here. That breaks it down for you.
This is for the September meeting you want this far, right?
Yeah, that 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
Oh, it just looks shorter because it's.
Yeah, I know, that's the same budget we did, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I don't want to, I think we have a lot to digest for the first meeting. And what, we already said a
Do
meeting
we want to
for-
go over what we want for next meeting? Can we go over that one more time? Sorry.
Well, from what we want from the SAU office, the services that we share with Hampstead, and let's exclude people now, because there was another thing that we want. So the services, that would just be things like transportation, food service. I don't know what else we would share with Hampstead. I know, and
So that will be the question.
that would be the question, okay? What other services? We'd like to see SAU salaries from 2019 to present?
2009.
2009, sorry.
Correct.
In my own writing.
Could I add on to that for the services, just backtracking, not only services, but if there are cost benefits? For example, I don't know whether we, get Leo's fuel and we have a group purchase both, for the SAU, not just the Timber Lane buildings, if they give us a discount for that, or discount for plowing, or, maintenance, or, we share electrical, electrician services or what have you.
And even each of the items on the budget here, it'd be interesting to see telephone, postage, especially the high dollar items like legal fees and employee insurance. Can we get each of these budget items broken down into Hampstead School District and Timberlane School District?
The legal is going to be we don't share those. So
Right.
legal is going to be what SAU legal is for SAU itself.
Yeah, there would
So-
be no breakdown, because if there's a legal issue with Timberlane, we pay it out of our budget.
Okay.
If it's something that pertains to the SAU, it comes out of the SAU budget.
Okay.
That's a great example. So if we were a single district SAU, we would not have 2 legal budget.
Right.
We would just have 1.
Right.
Because
But we
4
only
years
pay for
ago,
our
our
own.
budget, 4 years ago, our
Well,
budget
no,
for
we
legal
don't.
was
The
0.
SAU, we pay 77%.
And this year it's
of-
$40,000.
Wait a minute, 4 years ago it was 0.
4 years ago, it was 0.
Oh, now,
That doesn't show
wait,
expended.
now remember that the SAU budget at one time, there was a warrant that,
No, there was 1 year, right, it was.
there was 1 year that the SAU budget was not separate or something from the.
That's right. That's right.
That might be why you're seeing 0. I don't remember what year that was.
2015, 2016 actuals,
Is
0.
Is that where you're seeing? That's probably
That
why.
sounds about right, to when
That
it was.
sounds about right.
Because in 2014, I think that was around the time we voted to combine them.
To combine them.
And then it was combined for a year, and then we voted to uncombine them.
Yes, so there might be, it might
Look
be a
back on the
weird.
warrant.
But I mean, going back 10 years, 2009, 2010, legal services was $2,500. I have no data for 2010, 2011. Then the next year it was $1,200, then the next year $1,800. The next year I have no data, but it was budgeted at 500. The next year actual was 400. The next actual was 0. That's 2015, 2016. And then the actuals for 2016, 2017 was 16,000. 2017, 2018, 29,000, and budgeted for 40,000 this year. So that's spiraling out of control.
Okay, all right. So that's, if there's further, I guess if there's further breakdown within the budget that we can see in terms of Hampstead versus Timberlane, that would be good. You also have to understand, for those that aren't familiar, we own the SAU building, which is nice. If we withdraw, the building is ours. It's kind of a weird thing, but Timberlane actually leases the SAU from itself. So we pay, but then we essentially get it back. So Hampstead is paying 23% of the lease. So
42,250.
yeah. So even this loss of rental income of 42,250, that's not correct, because that rental income is 77% is paid by Timberlane back to Timberlane.
So it comes right back.
It's all
It's coming right
money.
back. So the loss is 23%.
And the rental rate hasn't changed in 10 years. It's been 42,250 and for the last 10 years.
Right, yeah. So, okay, so services shared with Hampstead, that's one thing. Salaries, and that will also show the change in the number of employees from 2009 to 2018.
Job description? Well, that's what I was gonna say.
SAU job descriptions, I feel like
This is all I find, I mean, unless I'm looking someplace else, like, all I could find on the website is basically like, what, if you're applying for the job, not the actual description
Right.
for
yeah.
like,
There are 14 positions there?
this, I just pulled the assistant superintendent, just as
Oh, well,
one
that's
example.
because that's currently
That's what's on
posted.
there,
No,
yes.
we're gonna get the job
We
descriptions.
got it at an SAU board meeting. They could very well be posted in an SAU agenda packet
they
that's
are.
made available to the public.
Oh, okay.
You
We
just
got
have to
them
go
for
into that
everybody?
folder. I thought you did.
Yes,
We haven't
yes, we did.
since
We did.
20, well, but you
Well,
guys
our
might have.
committee
You
doesn't
guys
have it, and you'd have to search
public has
through
it.
the agenda packets to find, it's not like you'd see these
Right.
are job descriptions, you'd have to search it.
Search it.
We'll find
But I
it.
think if you're gonna talk about the salaries and the positions versus what they're doing is kind of.
Right. So the SAU job descriptions, the estimated time for each of the SAU employees that they're devoting to Timberlane versus Hampstead, because Timberlane versus Hampstead. They're all SAU employees, but they don't all, some of them may be dedicated solely to Timberlane, because the SAU manages the business operations for Timberlane. So even though they're SAU employees, they could be sole Timberlane employees, because all they do is Timberlane books.
That's good to know.
Yeah, no, it is. It's good to know. And then if there's a more detailed line-by-line SAU budget, I don't think there is, but we can look. But this budget that you have, this is the level of detail that we look at when we're budgeting.
Wow.
We don't look any deeper than this. Except that, well, we do have breakouts on the salaries. That first $1 million line.
Right.
And Jen has the current, and I didn't bring it because it's in a different folder, but she has the 18-19 salaries.
I thought I just gave it to
I
you.
don't know, did I steal it?
No. That's 18-19, that's
Yeah.
19-20.
So that, Jen has 18-19 and 19-20 right there.
Okay.
So we do get that breakout, but other than that, this is what we typically look at. on the
So here's a
budget.
great example. So in this case, it's public information, right? Because you have it. So is this something then you can put up on the website, or is this something you'll email me, or how is this all going to work? I'm brand new to working on a committee in the school district.
I'm not sure where this is posted. Is this in the agenda packets for the SAU?
If you got it in an SAU board meeting, then it likely is. So what I can do I can certainly look,
Yeah.
because I
I'm just
can easily
hesitant to, like,
extract
you
it
know.
and yeah.
I know I got it in my SAU folder.
Right.
I
Right.
don't know if I got it through.
The agenda packet, but the committee doesn't want to have to try to look through and figure out which agenda packets the salaries are in. I
Right.
mean, you'd have to, the
Right.
business
No,
administrator must just have, this should be
So this
something
is
he
the-
could just
you
print
said
out.
that you have the 18-19 and the 17-18, or the
I have the
We're looking all the way back
19-20.
to 2009.
19-20? No, this is just, All right, and this is part of the back to 2009, you're right.
Right, right.
So it doesn't matter that you have it, because we're going strike that.
All right. So that's what I have for, so
It's a good start.
it's a good start. I guess I need to have a better understanding of, again, it's kind of an odd committee, so.
I won't
Does
take it
this-
personal.
Well,
I was
this-
about to say that.
Yeah, sorry, an odd committee in the way that it's structured and functioned, because I'm chairing this committee. So the question becomes, and I'm gonna have to run through the Timberlane chair, who's sitting over there, but not part of the meeting. Hi, Sean.
Sitting there signing.
Is, how are the requests gonna go? Do I have to request through the Timberlane chair for this committee? Or am I gonna be able to go directly to the superintendent?
Standalone committee.
Directly, I would
Directly, I
imagine.
think you're a
Well-
standalone committee.
If I can interject,
Sure.
Madam Chair, is that I am going to give you the authority to go directly to the superintendent with this committee's request.
Okay. Well, we'll discuss this tomorrow night, because as I give the summary of this committee, that question's gonna be raised.
Okay, that's fine.
Because it's an extra step to go through you, but I
And
understand how
like to-
things
and
work.
I personally, don't like to micromanage, so I believe that, this committee will come up with what it needs to do its job. And my job as the chair is to make sure that you guys can get your stuff working with the superintendent and the business office. So that request, I just want to basically be aware of it, but I'm going to direct the superintendent to basically take the direction from you with me copied on it. I'm not going to
Okay,
have to give another level of authorization to go ahead and do this.
okay, thanks. So we'll discuss that tomorrow. And we are requesting that if Mr. Dowd is available, he come on May 7th, and I'm assuming the committee would like a discussion on this
Please.
pro forma budget?
Put that
Yeah.
in here.
We did not ask for the contractual obligations.
I was going to ask, can we get a list of all the contracts and when they expire, et cetera, so that
Right.
we know?
Yeah, so we also need the contractual
Plus
obligations.
expiration dates.
Why don't we ask for that? Are we getting that?
Well, the SAU is getting that on the 9th. We asked for all contractual obligations for SAU employees on the 9th, so that shouldn't be
It's already
should be
being
easy to
worked
get.
on.
It's already being worked on.
So in addition to the salaried contractual obligations, are there any other contractual
I was gonna ask
obligations?
that.
Transportation.
Well, that's what we're asking, is all
Maybe
contractual.
software, maybe things like
Yeah,
that.
there might be,
Technologies,
but I thought from a discussion at one point that we were each buying our own, or we each had our
No,
own
that's-
servers or something
Yeah.
like that.
And then that goes back to like what kind of
Oh.
rates we get if we're buying them as a.
Depends.
It depends. And see, Ken's back there. I know there were I remember having hearing discussion about we own this, but so those sorts of things are gonna have to be parsed out.
So we've talked a lot about the quantitative, and I think we've got a really good plan to get the data so that we can feel comfortable. But I'd still really like to understand more of the qualitative. So, I mean, what I do know, obviously, is we are a school district of 4 towns, 9 schools? And Hampstead has, 2 schools, but no high school, so they're very different, so qualitatively. There's other school districts that are feeder into Pinkerton. It's possible Hampstead going in with one of those other school districts would be more of a benefit to them. But because there was such an upswell of energy that this passed so strongly on the budget, I would like to hear the qualitative information as to why the people put the petition out, what their feedback is, as well as the rest of the community. So is that something we can get today? Is that something, how do we get that?
The qualitative information, meaning,
There's been
How it
other
got
comments,
started.
there's been other comments about the 2 boards not working well together, right? I don't know the background, all I know is that Hampstead Board sued Timberlane Board last year. I don't know the background, but I'd like to understand, are there problems on the board? Is that a qualitative reason to separate? I would like to understand all of that.
yeah, okay.
I think in the, In talking with one of the attorneys who works with many school districts, one of the comments that he had made at one point was there have been many, many withdrawals throughout the state over the past 10 years. And I think typically prior to a withdrawal, you start to see that breakdown between different districts within the SAU. So it kind of, I don't think it's necessarily unusual that there's been some kind of progressive breakdown that got us to the point that we're at.
It seems like a marriage and it's starting to break apart, and do we want to separate, right?
But, you know, I understand what you're saying about qualitative. I mean, what are the other, when I look at, I think there are differences between the two districts just in terms of, I know you've done a lot of DOE website search. I look at the academic performance of the two districts, and they're markedly different in terms of what our averages are versus Hampstead's averages are. So that leads me to believe that there are some differences there that we have our district is a little different in terms of, I don't know, the who our student population is versus Hampstead's student population. And that obviously will have some impact on how the different the boards may want to address the educational needs of the students within the districts.
Well, I don't
So-
want to do this job, but I'm just wondering, would anybody on
Cheers.
on this committee be interested in? I know Timberlane just recently developed a new strategic plan. I think Hampstead's is not that old. I don't know if it would be of value to look at the two strategic plans when you talk about qualitative differences. I think that might give some insight as to the different directions of the two districts, what our common goals are and where we're looking at and where we diverge.
Well, and also when I say qualitative, I want to know, why do so many people want us to investigate this? What are they hearing? What are they feeling? Because there's value in that.
Public, please come and share your thoughts next meeting.
We do have the woman who entered the petition. I don't know if she would like to come and speak.
Well, we're not at the point of public comment now, so
Okay.
we should stick on the agenda.
Come back next week.
And not that I would mind in this case, but if we open that door, then what can happen in a meeting such as this is that it can go on forever, because then people will come up and then it'll end up being an open sort of dialogue. So it's better
We should
to,
have time limits.
we should have time limits, and we should reserve, I mean, there's nothing to say, I don't disagree. We could put it at the beginning and at the end of the meeting, because people might want to say, I just heard you discuss for an hour this, and I'm going to give you my opinion, if we feel that that's beneficial too. It speaks to your point about public documents, and now we're discussing a document and they haven't seen it, and maybe if they see it, they have comments. So I'm not opposed to that. I just, to be honest, I don't want these to turn into school board meetings for 5 hours, so.
But, and other qualitative things, I guess, right, is you wouldn't need an SAU meeting, an SAU board meeting, right? I mean, that's what I've seen on other,
Right,
right?
right.
So
So-
those are the kinds of things that I think
you
we
look
need
at-
to tally up.
Yeah, I mean, and that gets to be, it speaks to just having to be on both boards, and the lack of people that generally, sometimes I have a hard time even getting one person to run for a school board, and if you're having to commit to that many more meetings, that's a concern for people, so. So I think some of that, though, and I'll take part of that as an action item, not going out and really, I mean, I'm happy to have people send me comments as to why they think we should withdraw, and I can certainly put a list together. I can certainly look at other withdrawals and see what some of their, because most of them do speak to the qualitative aspects. I don't mind looking at the strategic plans and looking at the differences in the districts, and I don't know how much I want to fill in about the issues between the two boards. There's certainly one of the issues, we have moved to weighted voting so that Timberlane has more of the vote per weight. Hampstead is one town that has 5 votes. Timberlane is 4 towns and has 9 votes. So I can tell you, since I've been on the board, that's caused some tension, because you've got towns like, I mean, Danville's small, but Atkinson is large, so they have 2 votes and Hampstead has 5 votes. When you look at it town to town, and even with the weighted voting, we still need a supermajority of the Timberlane board in order to get anything passed, and we have 77% of the budget. So I think that's caused some of the tensions now.
And do we know which topics in particular are contentious?
The budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my, off
Well,
the top of my head,
that's-
that's my big,
yeah.
and I think for a lot of people
Yeah.
that I spoke to, before this past election, looking at the budget, and even, I mean, Hampstead had a withdrawal, question on their ballot years ago, and from a lot of the history that I read and people that I spoke to, for them, it was also about the budget. Did they feel like they were getting the biggest bang for their buck being attached to SAU55? And from people that I spoke to within the Timberlane district, for this time around, there was that question of, are we being conservative enough, or could we be more conservative if we were on our own?
In looking at the differences between Timberlane and Hampstead, some qualitative, you had referenced some qualitative, would it be beneficial to also look at some of the differences between the 4 towns in Timberlane as well? So obviously Hampstead does not, send their kids into the high school that is encompassed under this umbrella, and all the Timberlane schools do. There are some differences, and when we're talking about academic scores, obviously between Hampstead and the Timberlane district, but I think we'll see that there is some diversity of achievement within the Timberlane schools, the towns as well, because we do have different socioeconomic populations. There are, for example, Atkinson may be more similar to Hampstead than Danville is to Plastow, or Sandown is to Atkinson, or what have you. So let's make certain we're comparing apples to apples.
I think
Just,
that, it's funny you bring that up, because I was thinking about that today a little bit. Somebody had posed a question to me, and I was thinking that it's interesting that we have that data for the elementary schools, but we really don't have that for the middle school and high school. So once they get to middle school and high school, the data is...
It's a melting pot, yeah.
Yeah, it's a melting pot, it's all together. And my only hesitation on that would be to start...
I agree.
I don't want to start...
I agree.
Like, we are a 4-town district, and there is no interest, and I know this was a hot topic, there's no interest in withdrawing a town from the SAU. We're looking to keep this district whole.
Intact.
Yes. Yeah.
I wish you hadn't said that.
Oh, okay.
What?
Well, yeah, well, I was
She
just
said
saying.
one
let's
thing
go-
at a time.
That was, I should not have said that, yes.
See, now that's
I
the
just wanna
cart
focus.
horse thing that causes some concern amongst people. I mean, I know that is an underwriting theme and concern amongst a lot of our citizens, a lot of the folks that we're here representing. That's not hopefully what this is about. Hopefully we can look at this objectively. Let's try to keep it in that nature if possible.
Sabrina, sorry.
Is there a way, I know we did a survey when we talked about the buses, and we got kind of feedback. I don't know if we did a Survey Monkey. Remember the survey went around and we got the feedback from people? Is there a way to randomly survey if we're talking about what the community, why all these people went out, why all these people voted for it? Is there a way to kind of get a random survey?
Not a Facebook survey, no?
No, just a.
Well, my concern about surveys and the timeline is that as a researcher, I don't make up survey questions and just put them out to the public, because they're not, unless I've validated the survey, the data that it produces is not meaningless. So I don't think even within a 3-month time span that we could put out a survey like that would be garnered, and somebody, feel free, that would garner the sort of data that would be reliable and valid that I would want to use as a basis for, doing the withdrawal plan. It's not, I don't mind going out and gathering information through interviews or anecdotal or people coming in and speaking their mind, but I'm very leery about taking survey data and then trying to draw conclusions, especially if the questions haven't been validated.
Gotcha.
Well, people voted a certain way, but, there's a reason why we're in a booth when we vote. People might not
Want to share?
want to share.
True. I mean, I suppose we could, I mean, I suppose
Regardless
we
of the
could.
survey, we've been charged with doing this, so does it matter what the survey comes out with?
I mean, we
We're-
could
we're-
always,
Yeah.
We're doing our job.
Yeah.
We could always start too, like a email address, and if people want to provide us with why they voted, they can just email it in
Comment, yeah.
and kind of like a comment thing, and we can.
That's a good idea.
Well, I mean, we are required to have one public hearing, but that doesn't mean that we could not have a meeting date where we had an open, more of a dialogue as opposed to just comments from the public. Or, I mean, we could set aside more time if they.
Or extend the
it's-
comments to the public.
Extend the
it, yeah.
comments as long as it's,
If we find that
Yeah.
there are droves
masses
of people coming in.
yeah, if we find there are masses of people coming in, then.
We'll meet every week and,
Well, we have just one night of nothing but public comment.
Right, right, and that would do exactly what you're asking for, is to try to get to some sense of the qualitative data that Karen's trying to get at, because it is difficult to get at.
Well, that's why I'm just kind of like troubleshooting it to see how you get that knowledge from.
and since not everybody can make it on a particular night, I think you did suggest earlier that people can send their comments to you and.
Oh,
as the
certainly,
chair.
right, and they can send them to any of the members of the committee, because there are, all towns are representative, so if people feel more comfortable sending it to their town representative, it doesn't have to come to me. And if they don't feel comfortable sharing their name, you can always bring it to the committee, anonymously, I suppose. Okay, so moving forward, so for next time, we've asked that the SAU provide, and I won't reiterate the data, because
I got it, I think I got it.
I think you got it.
Got it twice.
In terms of action items, I have Karen is, my twin sister's name is Karen, just a little FYI. You're gonna be gathering quantitative data to give to us, correct? Was
Right.
that was kind of what you were tasked with?
Yeah, I'd love to fill in the gaps and then be able to share it out.
Okay, great.
I think it's important to see trends and projections.
I do too. And then, Mark, you have an action item on staffing within different SAUs, right?
So I've been told.
And I have, makes me shudder, qualitative data. I'm a quantitative person. But I will look at, and I'll look at the strategic plan. So those are the three people that have action items. Anybody else want to join in on an
I
action
think
item?
Karen had a timeline action.
Yeah, I'll
item.
make
Oh,
a
yeah,
little
Karen's-
Excel with a quick timeline and our milestones to throw it in there, as well as the meetings, once I didn't capture all of the dates, but once I get that from her.
You mentioned that you had a list of withdrawal studies that had been done or have been submitted.
Yes.
If you could send those around.
Yeah, I can send, there's a list, it's just a Word document, and it has links to different withdrawal plans, so,
Is that for all the ones you could find, those that did end up going the withdrawal route and those that decided not to, with the pros and cons of each?
I think there's some that didn't withdraw and some that did.
Oh, so this is a comprehensive list?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked at all of them, it's kind of my busy time of the year, so.
I've read a couple of them, and some did, some didn't.
Yeah.
From what
I
I
was
read.
gonna say, it's easy to find the plan, but then I would never know if they if the voters
Right.
actually.
Oh, well, that's
voted
true
for the-
too, yeah, yeah.
There are a lot of plans out there, but I don't know
How far it got.
if the voters approved
them.
the plan or not.
I don't know if the DOE has a list of plans that have been approved. I also need to find, I know there's a contact at the Department of Ed that deals specifically with withdrawals, so I need to.
Would you like me to find out who that contact
Sure,
is?
why don't you find out who that contact is?
So we want to see if the
Agenda and
DOE
action
has a
item.
list
Yeah,
of
I
them.
felt bad not having one, so I'll take that one.
Want to trade?
No. You have your own action item that you were
Easy
looking
one.
for.
Well, yes.
Barbara, you want to help me with the qualitative data by reading through some of these other withdrawals? Because I tell you, you read through them and you think, yeah, that's one of the issues that we're having. I don't know, at least when I'm reading through
Yeah,
them.
I can
we'll-
spend
we'll-
some time reading reports and we can divvy them up.
And just
then
kind of
figure
see
out.
what, because they are really helpful. Some people have done really tremendous jobs on the report. I don't know if we want to have, most reports have like a historical, I'm getting ready to tag you over there, have a historical part.
We're not there yet.
What?
We're not
Oh.
doing it. We're not doing that.
Well, but But it would be good to know the history of the districts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'll
don't think
also,
it's-
you also wanted to know about the
The
original.
original plan.
I'll ask for that when I call DOE too.
Right.
Okay, because I'm gonna call them for that.
1964, I heard,
Was the,
was the date of the original.
Well, not to give you the work, because I can help you if that's something we want, but, when we're looking at the staffing levels and all this, do we want to put that quality into it, like what we're getting from them, what's their graduation rate, what they
Oh,
have?
geez.
I mean, that's why I said I'm not gonna give it to you,
Yeah.
like, if we wanna see, like, what their successes are and their, pros and cons, if we pick a group of them.
So I don't know if that would just be muddying the waters, because every district we look at will be so unique
Yeah,
that we may
that's
be the exact same size as,
Well, that's why I say it's
Bedford.
tough to just
But the
say-
demographics and
Yeah.
the successes for money spent may be different than a Nashua with the same population.
Well, that's why
I-
I'm saying it's tough to say, okay, well, we got 3,500
Yeah.
students here, 3,500 students here, and,
Yeah.
some of them are single towns.
Exactly.
versus,
Right, that's
You know,
kinda-
we have that
Yeah.
unique feature of being 4 towns with 4 very different makeups.
Right.
There are
You put that more
7
eloquently than I
SAUs
did.
that are in this scenario. where-
We can see if
You
there
know,
was
you know, the
standard
more you
deviation.
go,
What's
the more
standard
work we're
deviation?
giving you, right?
So there are 7 SAUs that are multi-town.
So if, once you take out all of the one district, one SAU, that's 73 of them, now there's 27 left. And then you take out all the districts, if the SAU is one town, one district.
Okay.
Or one district, one town, I took all of those out.
Gotcha.
So now we've only got 7 where there's multi-town districts
What do you got?
and multi-districts within the SAU.
Oh.
And they are number 2, Interlakes, number 9, Conway, number 16, Exeter,
those are all on your sheet. if you wanna
19,
just mark them,
Goffstown,
What I just gave you.
23, Haverhill, 46, Merrimack Valley, and 55, Timberlane.
So these are
Small ones.
Because these are all on.
Yep,
here.
some
This
of
is the
them
whole
multi-towns,
state.
multi-districts, multi-towns, multi-districts.
Yeah, so I was really surprised to go through and find out a lot of those are one town, one district, that are multi-district SAUs.
Because I pulled the regionals too.
But again, the data from
That's
the
why I said take this,
DOE,
it's happier.
it's all on, I had to take 5 spreadsheets and consolidate it in order to be able to do this kind of comparison, so.
So you've got
VLOOKUP
one
is my
massive
friend.
spreadsheet.
Yes, I
This came
do.
from the DOE.
Yeah.
Okay,
But this has all the schools, but the regional schools are actually on here too.
perfect.
Okay, so,
So we're really not, we actually are more unique than we think. The
yes.
fact that we've got 4 towns in one district and 1 town in another district. It is a very unique situation, and other towns that were in our situation clearly have gone the other way and actually withdrawn.
Right? So if you go to the DOE website, right, and you put, this guy, and you can
So-
see how much they make, It gives you how much they make on the E. DOE.
Do that for multi-towns then.
So, Sabrina, do you want to work with Mark on that? Because you have kind of a big, I'm trying to give everybody an action item.
Well, I was giving them all the stuff that I
You're gonna
looked
help,
up, so.
you're gonna help us too.
What
on
is
the
Sabrina
qualitative.
doing?
Sabrina's gonna help work with Mark on different, staffing at different SAUs, because that's kind of a big,
Yeah.
it's a big,
Got it.
maybe you can,
Mouthful.
big mouthful, yeah. And then,
Okay.
I think the
Yeah,
3
it
of
might
us,
even just be some phone
the
calls.
3 of
to-
us will also work on the, yeah,
Well, we
you
can
don't
pick
get
out the
off
ones
with
we
just the
want,
calling, finding out who the DOE point of contact is, are gonna work on
I'm
the
gonna get
qualitative.
the original SAU agreement too if I can. That could take some time.
We're gonna do pros and cons,
Okay.
qualitative, and Karen's got a good start on the quantitative.
Someone with like a.
All right,
attendance of over
so we'll
1,000.
plan to meet at 7 o'clock on the 9th, are there,
7th.
7th? Oh, the 7th. 7th,
Ninth
okay.
is the SAU
That's
14.
right, I've
We
got
did
an
say
SAU,
7, yeah.
that's why that
We've got the
number.
9th in our head
Okay.
for SAU meeting.
On the 7th, is there anything else anybody else want to put out there before we adjourn?
We never really did open it up to the public comments. Were we gonna do that or no?
We did,
Yeah,
it
we
was
did.
on
We
the
did.
agenda, but.
We did? Nobody asked? Okay.
And I'll have to get an agenda out and posted before the next meeting. Let's just talk about that now. Are we gonna have agenda items, or are we just gonna have everybody report back on where they?
I think each one of those things would be an agenda item.
Yeah.
Well, I'll need the data
Okay.
that we're requesting before I can fill in the gaps on my spreadsheets to be able to share that out.
Okay, well, I don't know if you're gonna be able to get that in time before,
Right.
some of it you should be. Actually, Jen's got 2 years of salary data.
That would be helpful.
And I have some of the I have the contractual obligations. I don't have letters of agreement, so I can give you some more information. So I guess, we'll just do the best you can. I don't expect if we had all this, we'd be almost done by next time, so I don't expect that's gonna happen. And we'd like to have the business administrator here next time to discuss this pro forma budget.
Yep.
And we'll have the contracts, so that, because that's the big driver in this budget.
Right.
And could we start maybe talking about criteria for whether we pursue the withdrawal or not? Start sketching out what the criteria might be, because it's very squishy from what I got so far.
Well, from at least what I've seen, and maybe as we read through more plans here in the next week or so, looks like most people do pros and cons, and then the committee discusses, and then there's a vote. I don't know as we're gonna have set criteria. I think we're gonna end up with a list of pros and cons.
And we may discover some pros and cons along the way. So I don't know whether setting the criteria in advance will limit us from truly evaluating it neutrally.
Criteria might change too.
Yeah, right.
You know, what's important to us
That's what I'm saying,
today.
just start figuring out, well, what is the criteria for, that would have us go one way or the other, not saying this is absolutely what we're gonna use.
Well,
Right.
maybe the criteria would be part of what's
Yes.
required in the planning, you
Yeah,
know.
that's what I was just
Estimate the
looking at.
construction costs, well, I don't think we would have any construction costs.
Right.
Educational and fiscal analysis.
Well, that's on the remaining district, and that has to be addressed. We have to address the Hampstead, should they remain.
That's
way
only if
down
we
the
get to that point.
Well, yeah, if we get to that point.
I'd like to understand why they wanted to withdraw before. That was the first I've heard of that. So maybe they feel like they're not benefiting from this as well.
Yeah, I don't know. That was, I have no idea on that. I've heard of that withdrawal petition, but I don't know what the rationale was. I don't know if anybody can,
Is that out there publicly, maybe?
Yep.
I would think so. I mean, the petition would have had to been out. I don't know how much discussion there was about it. It would have been,
Newspaper articles and things that you can pull up.
yeah, you might be able to.
Look at the
I'll stick to the data.
I'll look for it.
Thank you.
Did you remember
annual
what year you saw
reports
it in?
too.
Oh, the annual
None of them
reports,
remember
the
it.
annual report. I don't know how much information that would have. It would show what the vote was. The annual report would show the vote on that warrant.
Yeah, and there could be some discussion at deliberative sessions. I mean,
Okay.
they had a whole
Yeah.
public hearings and stuff, so.
Mhm.
Do we know what year
Deliberative
that was?
sessions.
That's why I just said,
Yeah, I mean,
another
they-
year.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Conceivably,
But I don't know off the top of my head.
one scenario would be, we actually dissolve SAU55.
No, that would not be up to us, no.
Okay, so,
No,
okay.
no.
An end
We
scenario
can
might
withdraw,
be
but
that we withdraw, create our own SAU, and then Hampstead may go in with Derry and Chester because they are very similar districts in that their kids all go to Pinkerton. So it could end up being a win-win, but I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could state something like, I mean, Hampstead could stay alone as an SAU, or Hampstead could choose to dissolve, but they would have to put their own petition warrant article in order to do that. They can't leave SAU 55 unless they do what we're doing right now.
Okay.
That's my understanding. You
That makes
you
sense.
can't, they would be in a
Makes
standalone.
sense.
Yeah.
And that could be, and this is where there probably needs to be some discussion between somebody, is if Hampstead feels that we're leaving, or that there might be, part of the plan would be to wait 2 years so that Hampstead has the time to figure out what to do. To be reasonable, I don't know.
That could
Quite
fall in line
certain
too with
people in
contracts.
Hampstead are looking at contingency plans.
Well, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think they can actually
They
do
can't
anything
without
without
going
going
through
through this process.
Yep. I was jumping ahead.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much. We'll adjourn at 8:36.
Thank you.